Hello, I'm the Nerd. This is the latest vlog. Actually the first for a while on Papyrus3D, which I've only recently started working on again. So I guess I should give an introduction to Papyrus3D if this is the first time you would have watched a video about it, which is very possible. So a bit about me, I'm a developer based in the northwest of England, working at the minute mostly on VR, AR, a lot of A-frame component libraries. And Papyrus3D is basically, it's a bit of an experimental project for me really. I just wanted to try and make some sort of game engine or like sort of framework, I guess, for creating VR and AR interactive fiction experiences which are in 3D. Now, I've been working on this fair amount actually for the last few weeks, so I decided to get back into it. I've been working on my interactive fiction game City of the Damned with Twine, but I thought I want to pivot back onto doing some more programming work. And it's actually been progressing fairly well as I've started to get back into programming mode. And yeah, it's just going to be a vlog talking about that. So, I'll try and talk about basically what I'm implementing in a minute. So, it is still quite a scattered in some respects, the actual build. Probably ideally could do with refactor in some respects, but it's actually not too bad. I've tried to keep it just within a controllable, you know, like there was a point where it started to spread too much in terms of the code, but I've sort of got that back under control. I'll play a little video of some screen grabs of me experimenting with it in browser and VR, etc, which is what I'm talking now. So yeah, it is actually becoming more usable now. I've just started reintroducing the dialogue system and the how to interact with you know, how to basically trigger dialogue. So I'll talk from a higher level now basically about how it functions so far. So how it functions, you have a map editor, which is a separate tool from the main gameplay basically. The map editor, you can create, they're like block-based maps, rooms. You can do 25 by 25, 50 by 50, 100 by 100 grids. And essentially at the minute, if you go into the map editor, it generates 25 by 25 grid with a wall around, or 50 by 50 with a wall around, 100 by 100 with a wall around. So like what that actually gets exported out as is an array. So and then different numbers represent different types of block height, etc. So for example, 1 is just a full height wall. 0 is a flat piece of floor, and then you have I've made other numbers that represent other you know, parts of a map. You'd have like, for example, eventually when you get around to the enemies, characters, and that sort of thing. Something I just started doing, and I've basically implemented it in a basic sense, though it's not fully exporting out yet, is so that you can add a custom height. So then you can then gradually, you know, add custom heights. So which would, for example, spit out a 0 in the actual array that gets the 2D array, two-dimensional array that gets spit out and then interpreted by the engine. You'd get, you know, so you'd get like 0 and then plus. I have a little slider, and you can add like 1 to 20 height, and then that will generate around that height will then get applied to the next wall that you paint on. But anyway, that's probably enough about the map editor for now. I'm still working on that quite a bit. Once all that's done, it gets exported. You can download the map that you've created as a JSON, and then basically have the main loop for the actual game itself. So when it's actually done, you'd fork this project, you'd add in your own assets, you'd add in your own dialogue obviously, but essentially the engine would be doing all the work for you. Now I can obviously talk a lot in depth about code and what's going on there, but I'll probably save that for another video. This is more of just a reintroduction to the project, talking about it. So the engine itself, so the main rendering loop it is actually a for loop. It's quite limited in some respects, it's a block based. The basic idea of this entire framework and engine is a quick way of being able to build 3D, VR and AR interactive fiction games. And there's also a shooting element as well, which we can work on a bit, so there will be a combat element too, which is still in development, but there is the basics there. I've got a gun model in the game. You can shoot if there's an enemy there. Still have to work on AI and movement scripts. I've been doing a bit on that recently, but far from finished. And also trying to work out the best way of doing it. Okay, so the maps. So I've basically got two folders. There's a folder called scenes, which is in the main folder for wherever the demo is rendered. In the scenes, you've got scene 1, scene 2. The engine itself will be able to just render one scene and render that. There's a HTML file, so where that's all done. So the actual rooms themselves are. So it's sort of weird actually. Basically, yeah, I've got the HTML, the index HTML, which is where obviously the room is added to a div element called room. And the idea is that it can, with JSON, it can load up these different maps, and then basically just using the same HTML file just load up. So the JavaScript engine will just load up. So there'll be a bit of code so that if you go to trigger an exit event, with a look at it, and there's an intersection that occurs from the cursor, and then it will then load up, clear the scene, load up the next level, and you're on to the next level. I haven't really figured out all the specifics of that, but basically, yeah. So yeah, and then once it's actually done, as I said, there will be, there's going to be the Papyrus.js, which is all the engine code. It's about 500 lines at the minute. There's also a components, so I split that way. So I've got the core engine code, which mostly is just rendering and basically focused on, I guess I would say it was mainly focused on the core sort of functions that are basically the internal logic for the entire system, right? And then I've got components, because there's a component library I'm developing alongside this, which is also, in total the whole thing's about 1,000 lines of code at the minute, which isn't too bad. But yeah, basically it's 1,000 lines at the minute. The components, I'm trying not to build on that too much, but I do also I'm trying to build it up so it's quite nice. There's you've got a movement component, you've got a cursor listener, you've got a player health, all of that sort of standard things like UI elements and things like this. And there's quite a lot of complexity in the code now. I'm trying to focus now on getting the core functionality to work and not overcomplicating it, if that makes sense. I don't want to make this too complicated. This is, for me, basically an experiment to see if I can build a sort of game engine using, or a sort of framework at least, using A-frame. Because I've become more familiar with A-frame, like I said, I've done more work with it. I've been doing these component libraries, and actually the room editor creator component came as a result of this work, but now I'm actually getting back into it, and I think I've advanced my knowledge to the point where I can actually get something sort of done that is at least somewhat there. I mean, this is not going to be the most advanced thing in the world, but it's a free open source way to quickly create VR and AR games, if you can get it done fine, and that's pretty cool. And then it's open source, you can build on it if you want even. Anyway, one other thing I need to work on a bit more now, I've re-implemented the dialogue system. So if you go to the actual GitHub, you can, which I'll put the link here, but if you go on the GitHub, you can view it now. You can see there is a sort of basic dialogue system of sorts. There's only one character in the actual test map at the minute, but you can go onto it. You can, assuming it's not down or I'm not midway through updating something on there, you can see that there is like a dialogue UI, which there's also doors as well. So movement is just done with, so movement obviously, because it's going to be mainly focusing on VR and AR, I developed a system whereby it's not that advanced really, but basically it's a gaze-based movement system. So if you stare at a certain block for about basically a second, then you'll move to that square. There are doors as well which I've implemented, and I've also implemented a basic water system. And yeah, there is a dialoguing system, so if there's a character, if you see on the demo, you can approach him, there's like a little icon next to him, you can scroll through a dialogue, which is just JSON actually, so that's just the JSON, it's just done with JSON. And I'm going to build on that soon and make it so that I can add some dialogue options. So certain scenarios, obviously, if it's going to be a 3D interactive fiction engine, you need to have it so that you can make certain choices. That's very important actually. But yeah, essentially at the minute, it'll probably, when it starts off, it's going to be like dungeon crawling, IF, sort of 3D games. And I'm going to build obviously like a test game once it's at that level. I think I'll end the video now. Obviously it's about 10 minutes, so any suggestions you might have, any comments you might have on the various videos that I've been playing in the background while I've been talking, chatting, any ideas for fun features possibly, would you be interested in testing it out or contributing? I would, if someone is actually a developer and has experience in this area, I'd be more than willing to have somebody contribute as well. If they, they know a bit of A-frame and JavaScript and stuff, more than okay for that. The repo information is below, and yeah, it's been quite fun. Like I said, I've done this as basically a challenge to myself because I've been watching a lot more game developers who sort of do game engine and graphic stuff from scratch. So I thought I'd do something like that. Obviously I'm not using like C++, I'm not doing it from scratch literally, I'm doing it from a starting point, and obviously 3JS, which on the surface is what A-frame is running, is abstracts a lot of that away from me, which is quite nice. It's like nice middle ground of that. Anyway, stop talking, ignore a nerd, like and subscribe if you like the video, and yeah, just let me know what you think of Papyrus3D so far.